To my channel. If you're new here, hi, I'm Alyssa. I go to the University of Texas as a junior, and this setup is far from my usual setup, but I would like to say that this presentation is brought to you by Prezi, and I had to figure out a way for you guys to see my face, so Zoom was the best way that I could do this and still give you guys the full presentation experience. That being said, I am touching on stuff that is relevant in today's world, so hold on to the seat of your pants. We're just gonna get right into it. Let me share my screen with you. All right. I am right here, guys. I am right in the middle. That being said, my project is on What to the Slave is 4th of July, and it's an analyzation by me, and all of my citations are in the description below for you guys if you want to check out anything and see where I got my information. That being said, let's just get right into this. What to the Slave is 4th of July is a speech by Frederick Douglass. Frederick Douglass is this guy right here. And the purpose of the speech was to not only convince the people of the wrongfulness of slavery, but to make abolition more accepted amongst the white people. Mind you, this speech was given to a predominantly white audience, and we are addressing slavery and the racism and the racial systematic system that we have in place at the time when this is all going on. I just want to give you guys some preface. But who is Frederick Douglass? Let me move me so that I'm not in the way. Sorry about that. Frederick Douglass was a former slave turned activist, and he became a leader in the abolition movement. He also pushed for the end of slavery and equality for human rights. We all know slavery means that this person is less than a person. I say that because during this time we had the 3/4 rule and all the icky things like women being sought out as property and black people being sought out as property and not being considered someone who has the basic human rights. That being said, I wanted to give you guys a little bit of facts about Frederick Douglass that I thought were pretty cool. He was born into slavery around 1818. I'm going to move myself again. I am so sorry. I didn't realize that I was just going to be in the way. His mother was black and his dad was of European white descent. That being said, it's an interracial relationship. I don't know. I just thought that was cool given the time, but we don't know how they got together as much as I want to. And I didn't really look into that. I probably should, now that I think about it, because I feel like it would be very controversial given the time. That being said, I'm all here for a full government name, and I found it. It's Frederick Augustus Washington Bailey. You can see where he gets the European side from and stuff like that. We are going to continue. How would this speech land in the current political climate? We are in a very opinionated generation. And that being said, opinions are often louder now because we have social media. And that being said, there's headlines, there's tabloids, there's magazines, there's the internet where nothing can be disappeared or rewritten or resaid because it's already there. We would find it, we would point it out and be like, you did this, and we would cancel you. That is just the generation that we're in, guys. That being said, I'm going to move myself a little closer so I can talk about this. I think personally, all of the liberals will probably rush behind Frederick Douglass, considering the fact that he touches on the racial injustice, the systematic injustice, and things that are still occurring today, unfortunately. As for our patriotic Republicans, this speech is not patriotic by any means, as he calls out things that he sees that are very racially driven. So I feel like our white Republicans that come from money would probably talk to him as he was less than, as he does touch on in this, and it's icky to know that someone is being treated as less than a person. But honestly, that's just our political climate. If someone doesn't agree with somebody, you're never going to hear the end of it, at least here. So that's where I stand with that. We're going to continue. I wanted to touch on certain movements that were brought up in the time during the pandemic and sometime after. We have the Black Lives Matter movement that happened in 2020. I feel like this was truly the start of pandemic for us, and this is when George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, those big massive cases, just they got enough press that it was able to overtake every single social media platform. When I say every single social media platform, I'm telling you YouTube, I'm telling you TikTok, I'm telling you Instagram, Facebook, like it was everywhere. That being said, I feel like this is one of the scenarios where I feel our generation would probably rally behind him because he would touch on subjects like this within the speech. And many of the racial aspects I felt like correlated with Frederick Douglass because he does touch on them so much, because this is not a celebratory speech as we see it or how it's meant to be sought out. I'm going to give you a little bit of facts on the Black Lives Matter movement. It occurred and it overtook as many protests broke out in 2020, and it started with George Floyd and continued with other cases such as Breonna Taylor. The movement emphasized the injustice and controversy within our justice system and the racial inequities within our justice system. And I feel like it was really pushed because of the police brutality and how ignorant these police officers were sought out to be. And I think it just overtook our nation. Like it truly overtook our nation to the point where certain wavelengths were met because of the fact that press was able to take over, and because it was able to take over as many social media platforms as it did. Because I feel like if it didn't, we wouldn't have gotten the Black Lives Matter movement in the slightest, or we wouldn't have gotten any of the outcomes that we did in these cases, especially for George Floyd. And I know that the Breonna Taylor case didn't really pan out the way that we wanted it to, but it definitely, like, what's it called? They have the little chess pieces on, the chess cameras. Those, like, spoke volumes to how we should probably change the way that we have our training to weed out those bad individuals. But there's two sides to every case, and I think that it was really explored during this time, especially in the pandemic. I feel like I was hanging on by the seat of my pants, and I was like refreshing every day to see it. Okay, that being said, there's another protest movement that I would like to touch on, and that is athletes protesting during the national anthem. This is something that also overtook all of our social media wavelengths, as we see with certain universities, certain NFL groups. You're on national television and you're protesting, but you're protesting peacefully. I feel like it's something that's so hard for people to see, because when people think of protest, they think of something of brutality and like how people rush the White House and stuff like that. But these were all rather peaceful until it was pushed to a point where it wasn't. The national anthem protest initially started with an NFL quarterback. Do I know what team? No, I am not that gal, but I can tell you his name. His name is Colin Kaepernick, and it started in 2016, specifically August 26th. It was written in one of the articles that I have linked in my citations, if you want to go check. But this protest was specifically for racial injustice and police brutality within the United States. I feel like this directly correlates with George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, and I feel like it correlated to the speech in the sense that this one specific line, I feel like, shook me to my core, that I was like, oh, my Lanta. It says, "Go where you may, search where you will, there is not a nation on the earth guilty of practices more shocking and bloody than are the people of the United States at this very hour." Mind you, he is talking about slavery. He is talking about the brutal environment that he is in, that he just got out of. That he's like, you guys thought this was normal, and you guys let this be the normal when we shouldn't have let it be normal. And I feel like this further emphasizes our systematic racism with other cases such as George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and the continuous racial injustice that we see in our world today. That being said, he did say some problematic things. Mr. Man did say some problematic things, and those problematic things are the things that I want to get into with you. I'm going to give you a couple of quotes that I felt were, relevant after this. I just wanted to show you guys the Texas Longhorns and how they were peacefully protesting, because this protest, I feel, shook the nation alongside the 2020 Black Lives Matter movement. That being said, let's get into my quotes from the speech. "Your high independence only reveals the immeasurable distance between us." I felt that this touched on how patriotic some of our Republicans were at the time, and how they really saw no difference when there was quite the big difference between blacks and whites at the time. And I also touch on this in my next slide. Sorry, I'm struggling. I felt that this was relevant because it connected the promise of freedom and life and liberty and the pursuit of happiness that is currently in our Constitution and has been a part of our Constitution for so long, that the quote draws the line of, hey, we're celebrating our independence, but you guys still don't understand that there's not many independence for those on the black side of things, because there's still cracks and racial injustices within that should be addressed and that haven't been addressed. We're going to continue with another quote that I found, and it's, "The existence of slavery in this country brands your republicanism as a sham, your humanity as a base pretense, and your Christianity is a lie." I felt this one was really loaded, because most Republicans are Christian. I am Christian, and I thought this was like one of those quotes that would probably cause the most turmoil within our community, because, well, it's problematic. But why is this problematic? Well, Douglas essentially attacks our political system alongside Christianity, the religion as a whole. If any of our public figures today made this statement, like a statement this bold, would probably be forced into hiding, because the Republicans and those that hold Christianity as a means of way to heal, I say as a means of way to heal because I use Christianity in that sense, whereas other Republicans see it as a way to justify their actions. I feel as though the liberals in this situation, who are also Christian and are religious to some degree, may also take offense to this. It would cause backlash on every tabloid, headline, social media platform. You would essentially be canceled in this kind of a climate that we're in right now. And I felt as though this quote needed to be in here. That being said, we're almost about to wrap this up, but I wanted to touch on cultural relativism. This is something that oh my gosh. Cultural relativism is something that we touch on within humanities as a whole, and I thought this topic was great, considering that there's so many things that you can question under cultural relativism, because to the degree of the speech, I found it complex to the way that he questions so many things, because he questions, can moral truths transcend the culture that we live in? So if you can treat someone as less than you, does that mean it's okay because of the culture that we live in? Should injustice be called out if it's considered normal? Essentially what he did in this speech was call out all of the racial injustices and said, hey, This isn't right. I'm gonna mourn while you guys celebrate. And then I feel like he essentially wrote this speech like it was an expose on the 19th century white Americans and how they justified treated some less than a human, because he touches on all of the slavery that has happened during this time. And then he also, to some degree, rejects cultural relativism because of his emphasis on slavery when it's supposed to be a speech celebrating the 4th of July. At least that was the context given when I read it. Now I'm going to give you guys all of my citations. It's a long list of citations. I apologize. I did a lot of research to make sure that this presentation was as well-rounded as it could be while also answering my topic question. That being said, I just want to thank you guys so much for coming along with me in this video, because I know it's not as cohesive as I probably would have wanted it, considering that this isn't the ideal situation to which I would film. That being said, I hope you guys learned something today, and thank you guys so much for following along. I will see you guys in next week's video.